Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining our webinar series today. So this is our 5th session of our 7-week webinar series. It has been a long journey. Of course, it will take place through October 20. So be sure to register all of those webinars that will be from today's session. So another thing that's worth mentioning here, so if you would like to learn more about Alteryx and how to empower your organization with informed decisions, so please follow Data Meaning on LinkedIn and YouTube. We have a lot of content there, a lot of information related to Alteryx and a lot of other platforms. So be sure to be there and watch everything that we have there. Of course, we'll be sharing this webinar recording via email with everyone who's registered to today's session. So that's it. So thank you for being here, and let's get started. So as usual, my name is Fernando Vizcaino. I'm a consultant and associate from the Data Meaning Enablement team. I'm an Alteryx ace. I have a lot of certifications. I'm working with Alteryx for 7 to 8 years now. I'm actually completing anniversary since the first day I'm using Alteryx. So congratulations to me, right? And today we're going to be talking about the administrative overview of the Alteryx gallery. You already talked about the system administrator point of view. During our previous session, we talked about everything related to the user side page. So now you are well aware of everything related to the gallery. And now we are going to talk about how to govern everything related to that. Of course, we'll be still talking about APIs in our next session, as well as the production process, plus analytical apps. And there you'll have an idea on how to publish your workflow for the first time, as well as all the errors that you can have there, right? But let's get started. So for today's agenda, we'll be walking you through all the pages, all the admin pages from the diagnostics one, and you'll be understanding how you can manage subscriptions, collections, districts, workflows, and all of your users, as well as some best practices and how you start leveraging data connection, credentials, and also how to make your gallery prettier, right? After that, we'll have a question and answer, but of course, if you have any questions, we have Andrew King here answering all of your questions. So feel free to ask anything related to today's sessions or any other thing related to Alteryx Server as well. All right, moving forward, the first page that I have here to show you related to the diagnostic page. So this page provides you visibility related to everything that you have in your Alteryx gallery. The first thing that you can see here is all of your apps, right? So have the total apps here, the public ones, all the ones that are in your homepage or in your districts, and all the apps that was deleted as well. Related to users, we have all of your users as well as the disabled ones. So in Alteryx Server, you can't delete a user. So the only thing that you can do there is to disable a user. So everything related to that user will stay there, all the workflows, all the configurations. But of course, you can share that with another user as well. You have all the collections as well, the number of collections, the number of apps inside those collections being shared privately, as well as the number of users inside those collections. As you can see here, we have more users in collections than the total users. So that means actually that you can have a user in more than one collection. It's only for you to have an idea of everything related to collections. But of course, you have here the server settings as well, the number of studios, number of credentials, schedules, active jobs, data connections, and if you have the EMP engine enabled. We are going to be talking about all of this, how to manage everything here, but also what you can see here is everything related to your worker. Of course, if you have a multi-node environment, you'll be able to see all of your workers. You can see here information related to this specific worker is able to run unassigned jobs, and you can see here the CPU and memory consumption as well, right? So it's an overview, is the first page for you to start understanding what you have inside your Alteryx gallery. And when you move forward, actually you have the global settings there. So you have three categories that are available for you. It's related to user settings, workflow settings, as well as gallery settings. So the first one is related to the user settings, and it's the default role for user when they first access the Alteryx gallery. So as a best practice here, we always suggest you to leave this as a no access, because if provide access to the user as they register, maybe you have some public workflows there, and that user, you have access to that. But of course, if that's not a problem, you can also enable this option here for users that are not registered yet in your gallery. They will be able to run these workflows as well. All the workflows that are public and registered users will be able to run as well. Secondly, we have the workflow settings. So the first option here is when we have a dev and prod environment. And this is for curators only. So of course, as an user, as an artisan, you will be able to also select this option on a workflow level. But as a curator, you can also enable for the admins to select this workflow to migrate from one environment to another. You have another option here for the global credential setting. And here you have three options actually. So you have the options to always use the default credentials. And that means that you are using a studio credential. It could be a worker node credential. If you remember the run as configuration from the system settings, but it can have as well the Alteryx Server credential. And the idea for credentials here is that sometimes, so if you are running a workflow with a specific credential, that credential has access to a data source or has access to a share folder. And that's why this option can be used. You have another option, and that's the one selected here, is to allow the user to select the option there when saving the workflow to the gallery. So you as an artisan, as a developer, you'll be able to select between three options also. So have the option for the user to need to provide a credential when running the workflow, always provide a credential. So it's like a user and password for the user to run or to access the data source. You have the second option there that a user can select the credential. So it could be a shared credential, or they could include their credential as well. Or you as an artisan can provide the credential there for the user always to be using as well. This is the one more indicated, the suggested one, but you have one also for always to require user to include a credential there. So I have three options. This is the suggested one, is best practice for you to always allow user to provide credentials. And that's basically it. Lastly, we have the gallery settings. So here you have a global option for the users to schedule workflows. You have this option on the user level as well. But if you want to disable all users, the permission for them to schedule workflows, so this and here is your way to go. You have an additional option here to disable direct download globally. And here, what this actually means is that an end user, that could be a viewer, a member, or also an artisan, they will be able to manually download the workflow. Of course, even if you disable this, the artisans will be able to download or to get that workflow from the designer. That's something that we will talk more during our last session, the production process, but that's basically the idea. And you have an option here for allowed hosts. So you can provide here a list of hosts for your server, and it's basically a security measure to prevent host header attacks. All right. So here, everything related to global settings, but let's move forward to subscriptions. So subscriptions are the same as studios. And here's the place where designer users are allowed to publish and share their workflows privately, right? So let's go inside a studio. And as you can see here, it's a share studio. By default, when an artisan is registered or when you set a user role as an artisan, a studio is automatically created. And you as an admin, as a curator, it's your responsibility to include other users here. So as you can see here, it's a share subscription. You have the option as well to assign a specific worker. So if you have a multi-node environment, you will be able to assign a worker for the data science team. If you recall, we're saying a lot about that. So it's CPU intensive, these workflows, and maybe it's better for you to separate a worker for this team. And that's basically what you are doing when you are assigning a worker here. Here is the option for you to enable the APIs. And also here you have the option for all the users is scheduling workflows from within that studio. We'll be able to see all the schedules there. And you can also provide the workflow credential, a default workflow credential for all the workflows that are being run from the studio. One thing to keep in mind here is that in a coming release, I think it's going to be in 1 year, basically, subscriptions are going away. So the idea is that as of now, you are associating your assets with studios. After today, with the new version, the new Alteryx version, assets will be associated with users. So if you have one studio like this with share workflows, share assets, Alteryx suggestion, and my suggestion as well, is for you to start migrating that to collections. So instead of having a share studio, start having a share collection. All right. Moving forward, for studios for users, actually the users management page. So here you'll be able to add and manage all the users permission and also groups. So have the users and also groups. And here the first part. So let's go inside a specific user. So here, as you can see, you have all the permissions for a user. You can see all the groups that he's in. And as a default, all the actions here, not the only one that is yes is the active one, but as a default, all the ones here, schedule jobs, prioritize, assign, create collections, and API access, it's all disabled as default. So it's your job as a curator to enable everything that user has permission to do so, right? Of course, if you have a lot of users, for you to manually select these actions can be very stressful. So one thing that you can do, actually, so you can select, for example, 3 users, and you can set permissions for all of them, right, at the same time. Another thing that you can do related to users, you can start leveraging user groups here. And when using this configuration, actually you have two different options. You have the option to create a custom group, and you'll be adding users there manually, but you'll be also able to use an Active Directory group, right? And the idea here is that if you want to set a default group role, you will be able to do that as well. So if you have a group of administrators and all of them should be creators, or all of them, you have a group of Alteryx developers in your Active Directory. So the idea there is that you can set a group role as a default as well, right? So when you create a group, could be actually for the custom one. So you can start including members here manually. One thing that you can start seeing here is the number of collections that you have this group in. So for the finance group, of course, we have only one member here, but the idea is that if I include this group inside a collection, all of the users will start having access to everything related to that specific collection. But of course, you can start using groups to also start leveraging data connections and also credentials. All right. But moving forward, now we have our workflows. So the first thing that you as an admin can do here is that you can manually add a workflow to the gallery. All right. Secondly, when you go inside a workflow, you'll be able to see all the configurations that you are enabled of doing. So as you can see here, you have no access, you have no permission to run workflows. So that's, of course, you as a creator, you can have access to that workflow share in a collection with you. And there you will be able to run that workflow, but from the admin page, you will be only able to set, for example, here, the run mode, the worker assignment on a workflow level. You have here ways of publishing that workflow to your public gallery, as well as adding tags to a workflow. And if you recall, adding tags mean that I'm including that workflow in a specific district, right? And it's your job as well. It's your responsibility to start creating tags. And you can see here that you have one specific tag that is admin only. And that's, let's say, for example, you have a specific district that you as an admin want to include a few examples for all the users to have access to, or all your company's macros will be there. And you don't want users to start messing around that specific district. So you can start adding this admin only tag, and you as an admin, you will be the only one including assets in that specific district, right? So that's basically the idea when we talk about tags. For collections, so the idea for collection, of course, we talked about this during our previous session, but the idea is for you to allow users to share assets privately. And what are assets actually? So it could be workflows, it could be apps, it could be macros, or insights. Insights, interactive charts, I showed you before. And the idea is that you can start sharing that with other users, right? But the main difference between a user and an admin when managing the collection is that an admin is not allowed to include or remove assets. As you can see, or if you remember, we had supposed to have an add workflow button here, but as an admin, you don't have access to that. But you have access to start adding users. So users from the Active Directory, for example, as well as user groups. So that user group, that custom user group that we have created before, you will be able to start using that here. So instead of using user by user manually, you can add multiple users at the same time. One other thing that you can do is for you to change the owner. So let's say a user leaves the company and you need to manage and to change the ownership to another one to start managing this specific collection. So this is the button. It's only a matter for you to select another user and that's done. Districts. So districts are very straightforward. It's only a matter for you to enabling or disable the district. Of course, you need to create one as well as editing. And here, the only thing that you need to configure is related to the title. Of course, it will be create a URL dynamically. But one thing that my suggestion actually, it's always better for it to include a tag with the same name of the district. Because if you don't do that, it will confuse the user there. Because you can have here a district, a finance district using a tag called HR, for example. That's possible. So the best practice here is for you to always have the same name for all the options here. It's only a matter for you to add a description. And of course, here you could have an admin tag, for example. And only you as an admin would be able to start including assets to that specific district, right? But moving forward here, so you'll be also able to create gallery data connections to start sharing that and leveraging these data connections with the artisans, the developers, the designer users to connect to specific data sets. So by default, you have a built-in functionality for SQL Server and for Oracle Server, right? And you have an open source area as well to bring any other connection string that you want. My suggestion here is that you create your connection string on Designer manually, and then you copy and paste that here. All right. After saving, you have all of your connections here. As you can see, you have the connection string. One thing that's pretty great about the connection string, of course, you will be able to see the user, but the password is encrypted. So the idea for gallery connection is that as you start sharing that with designer users, you don't need to share passwords anymore. So they will have access to these data connections when using these connections in Designer, but they don't need to configure the whole thing here. So when going inside a data connection here, so you have all the users that you are sharing that connection with, but you have also the custom groups, and you'll be able to start adding those here. One thing that's worth mentioning, so we have two different user groups, the one related to Active Directory and the one related to custom groups. For now, you are only able to add a custom group here. So what happens if you want to use an Active Directory group to start sharing these connections? So my suggestion here, it's a best practice as well. So you need to create an Active Directory group first, and then you include that Active Directory group inside a custom group. And then you will be able to add those here, right? So inside a user group, you can also include other user groups within, right? So you can start seeing and visualizing all the governance that we are able to do related to workflows, assets, as well as users when creating the user groups. You have the same functionality here for credentials, right? So as you add a credential, very straightforward as well. It's already, if you are connected to AD, you only need to include your user and password, and by adding, it will test already your password. And if it's fine, you'll be able to do the same thing as with data connections. So we'll just be able to start sharing that with users or groups. And the idea here is that for the end user or for the developer, they will be able to access a specific data source or access a share folder or anything that you need credentials to access to. So we talked about this during our last session related to the user side. We are going to be talking more detailed matter when we go to the production process and you start seeing how this actually works, right? And how can you configure this for your workflow to be able to access a data that the user that's run the workflow doesn't have access to, right? So you have user, you have custom groups, but let's move to jobs. So the jobs page actually lists all scheduled and all workflows that were manually run. So you have 3 tabs here. You have the status. The idea for the status, it's all the jobs that are currently running are queued on your server. So if you have a lot of queue jobs here, queue workflows, that means that maybe you need to start thinking about scaling your server because you have a lot of things on the queue there. You have the scheduled workflows tab, and that will display all the schedules set up for your Alteryx workflows, right? So as you enter in a scheduled, as you can see, we don't have access to the data as an admin, but we are able to see the status of that schedule as well as editing, right? The same thing, the same way as the artisan would be able to do. You have the third tab here that's related to migration. So when you start using Alteryx Server, you are also able to connect Designer to the schedule, to the scheduler directly, right? You need to use that key, the controller key, the controller token, and you will be able to, your designers, users will be able to schedule locally in their designer. And what's happened when they do that is actually that it's all scheduled on the scheduler components. But if you want to move all of those workflows that are been locally running to your server, to your gallery, here you have ways to do that automatically. But when the only thing worth mentioning here is that when you are scheduling from the designer to run locally, actually, you have 2 options. And the only option that enables you to migrate workflow, for example, here to my studio, is that if you are copying the workflow to the scheduler DB, right? So you have 2 options there. One option that is running the workflow directly from your local folder. And the second one is when you are saving the workflow to the scheduler database. And this option allows you to migrate directly to any studio that you want, right? So when we talk about schedules, we have also ways of forecasting the schedules. So as you can see here, we have 30-minute slots. We have all the jobs that are currently happening. You have ways for looking details related to all the workflows that are running. You will be able to start analyzing users, the jobs from specific users, schedules, from workflows. You can start analyzing it actually if you need to scale your server or if you have a user that is messing around with schedules and are not doing a good job with that, right? So the idea here is for you to have an overview of everything that will be happening from today on in 30-minute slots. One other thing that is great here as well is that you will be able to start analyzing. We talked about this during our scaling session. The whole idea here is that you can start looking for your forecast and you can start moving around your jobs. So as you can see here, it's all color coded and what that actually means. So I have one example, the same example that I showed before, but the idea is that you have, for example, a single node environment. So it's one worker. With one worker, we can run 2 workflows simultaneously. So that's the best practice. So each 2 cores, 1 workflow. And the calculation here is that, okay, so if I have 2 concurrent workflows, I have 30-minute slots. That means that I have 60 minutes for each slot there. In this case, in this example, I have 6 jobs scheduled. And summarizing, the total runtime is 30 minutes, for example. So that means that for this specific slot, is 30 divided by 60. That means half, right? And as you can see here, since it's color coded from 0 to 1, that's fine. So everything here is fine. But as we move forward here, start seeing this color, that means that I have a total runtime that is more than my runtime capacity. So the idea here, of course, it's ways for you to check in if you need to scale out or scale in your server. But of course, for you to connect, to check this, for example, this schedule, and to move to a previous slot where that wouldn't be a problem, right? So that's basically the idea. And of course, you are seeing here, you will be able to edit your schedule from here and to move around and to configure the whole thing for you to have your server running smoothly without any kind of queue there. So that's basically the idea for the schedule forecast. But of course, as promised, we have ways of making the gallery prettier. So you can start including, for example, your logo, your server name, as well as all the colors here that you are currently seeing here. All right. Related to that, you can start including medias, and that means, for example, a banner for it to start showing any message that you want your users to see or any links. You will be able to start sharing those inside your gallery. So what this actually looks like. So for the user, if you go to your home page, that's actually what is being shown there. This can have a link pointing to anywhere else. So if you have any kind of information that you want to share non-related to Alteryx, that's something that you can do here as well. It could be related to support, for example, right? So if you have any kind of issue, if you want to ask for permissions, please click here and then you'll be moved to send an email or open a ticket with support, right? You have ways of sharing pages and links as well. So pages, you have ways of sharing links, and it's all gonna be available here. So have this chain icon here, and you can start sharing anything, and that doesn't need to be related to Alteryx. So you can have links, or you can have pages that you are creating inside of Alteryx with instructions, also anything related to support, anything that you want to create, any page, and you could start including HTML there. You can start including that here for the users to start seeing from the home page, right? Lastly, we have notifications. So the system message means, so every time a user logs in to the Alteryx gallery, you can share anything with them there. So for example, if you have a maintenance happening during the next hour, you can share that, and every time the user go to the home page, or every time they refresh the first time, they will be seeing this and a notification for them. You have a lot of emails here. So for workflow that's being added to a collection, you have a lot of default ones here. But of course, you can customize all of them. You can enable or disable some of them. But of course, for the most important ones, you will not be able to disable. All right. Another thing here that you have groups, email groups. And the idea for email groups actually is that you can disable all of them at the same time. And you can start creating emails as well as custom groups for specific users. So for example, for admins, only admins will start receiving workflows that are shared in a collection, or workflows that are included on the server. So you as an admin will be able to see the whole thing, everything that is happening inside a gallery, and it can be an email. Of course, you have a lot of ways of including emails to workflow, or a lot of messages to workflow, login information, but here is another option for you to start managing everything that is happening, as well as for the users to receive notifications related to accesses, permissions, or anything related to your assets in your Alteryx gallery, right? So we have covered here all the pages, but of course, if you notice it, we have a lot of ways for dealings with subscriptions, with studios, with users, and you have a lot of things in a lot of different places. So the idea here for this part of our webinar, it's guidelines for all the configurations for a studio, for subscription, for example. So when you are dealing with subscription, luckily you have everything inside the subscription page. So you'll be able to start creating, removing, or renaming a studio. You'll be able to start adding or removing users to that subscription. So you'll be creating a shared subscription, a shared studio there. You have ways here to enabling API access to all the users inside the subscription. Assign worker as well as the default credentials to that specific studio, right? When start talking about users now, so you have the collection page. So if you want to add a user to a collection, so if a user asks you to include that to a specific collection, you need to go to the collection page, and there you'll be able to add or remove users. You'll be able to also start editing users and custom group permissions to the collections page. And also, if you need to change collection ownership, that's the place for you to go, the collection page. Other than that, the only configuration related to collections that are not in the collection page is directly in a specific user. So if a user needs to be able to create a collection, then you need to go to his profile and you need to enable that option for the user. Or, as I showed you as well, to a group of users at the same time, right? So here for users, so if you want to change anything related to users, of course, go to the users page, you'll be able to change its role. So it could be a viewer to see public workflows or run public workflows, a member to run private workflows, an artisan is the Alteryx designer user that will develop the workflows and publish to the gallery, and the curator, that's the admin, and that's the one managing everything that is happening here. So you will be able to enable, disable any user's permission that you have there. You'll be able to deactivate a user, reset passwords, and this you won't be able to do if you are connected to the Active Directory. But you can go as well to the configuration page to set the default role for all the new users there. So when you have gallery connect to the Active Directory, during the first access, the first time the user access the gallery, that's what the default role is for. If you need to share a data connection to a specific user, you need to go to the data connection page as well as the credentials in the credential page. Related to workflows, so you have the workflow page where you can start creating and adding tags to workflow. And if you add a tag to workflow, that workflow will start appearing in a specific district, right? You will be able to select the run mode, and that means that you have the safe mode, semi-safe, and unrestricted. That's related to where the data is coming from, as well as the tools that is permitted in a specific workflow. Of course, we have a whole list there with a lot of different tools, and I'm going to be showing that during our last session as well. You'll be able to delete a workflow, manually add a workflow to your studio, and you'll be able to also make a workflow public or private. And from the configuration page, you will be able to enable, disable all the downloads, so manual downloads, and that doesn't mean that your artisans, your developers will not be able to open that workflow from Designer. That's only disabling the manual way of downloading your workflow package. Here, you have the option to enable unregistered users to run workflows. By default, this is disabled, right? But you have here ways of setting the workflow credentials default option. Of course, if you go to the workflow level, you will be able to also set the workflow credential. So this is more of a global settings. Okay. Lastly, we have jobs. So you have the jobs page, and you'll be able to migrate jobs from Designer to Gallery. So if you have a lot of users there that are using Designer to run workflows from the scheduler, those you will be able to start managing from your Alteryx gallery, right? So when you migrate those jobs and those workflows to the gallery, you will be able to start managing those workflows and seeing everything that is happening to those workflows, right? You'll be able to edit and delete schedules. That could be due to forecasting. So you are seeing that you have a problem in a specific slot, then you'll be able to edit and move it to a different slot. You'll be able to cancel jobs manually. Of course, we have on the system settings ways to time out a job But if you want to do that manually, you'll be also able to cancel those jobs, or as well deleting schedules, right? So schedules didn't happen and jobs are currently happening. You have your user page where you can disable a user from scheduling a workflow, but you have a global permission as well in your configuration page. And another thing, the last thing here related to jobs, related to any configuration from the admin side, is for the subscription page. So if you want to share all the schedules with all the users inside a studio, you need to go to your subscription page. But once again, keep in mind, Alteryx are removing studios subscriptions from the gallery. So it's suggested for you to start moving all your share studios to a share collection, right? Of course, as the upgrade happens and Alteryx will start adding everything that you have inside a studio to your collection. So just keep in mind, that's one process that needs to be done if you want to start to keep upgrading your server as Alteryx releases new versions. That's basically it. Let me see if I have any questions here. All right, we have a question here from Prashant. Not sure if I'm saying your name correctly. Sorry if I'm not. So is there a way to leverage the schedule forecast and prompt or notify users that their select schedule frequency is failing under peak hours? Do you want to answer that, AK? Here saying that you want to answer, live answer this question.
Well, that was for you. I can take it. So there is a way, I mean, to prompt or notify the users. It's not built in. So essentially you would just be using those API calls via workflow, and you could do an audit and then send that notification via the workflow over to the users. That in mind, given that your workflow is either failing or the server is overloaded and it's queued, would imply that you don't have any bandwidth. So if you were trying to run one of these high frequency workflows, which Prasad, you had asked before about differentiating the worker nodes, you can differentiate and have an admin only worker node that is running tasks such as this, where it's able to notify the users and it has a separate lane. So think of this being like if you're driving a car, an HOV lane or like a semi-only lane or bus lane, right? That's what you'd be using in this instance to kind of help clear that up.
Great answer, okay. Great question, Prashant. Yeah, that's something that we are going to be talking about during our next session, actually, the gallery APIs. So one last question here is from Matthew Davis. So it's what server version was used for the demo today? So it's 21.2. Of course, we are currently in 21.3, but everything here was related to that version. All right. But that's it for today. Thanks a lot for joining today's webinar. I hope that you like that and enjoy that as I enjoyed. As a reminder, so keep in mind that we will be sending the webinar recording to your email, but please follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. We have a lot of different content there. We have our Alteryx Server Webinar Series from the previous versions. If you are using a previous version, you have a lot of these configurations. You have another server series there from, I think, from 19.4. But of course, if you have any other questions, you can contact us directly on sales@data meaning, as well as enablement@data meaning. But thanks again for watching and have a nice Wednesday. See ya.